If you don't mind, this is actually your last chance. Now get out of my way.
You're now moving at 1/16th speed, but feeling all that pain in real time.
All right, 1/16th speed. You know, Ksenia, via the context, I can understand what that means, but I actually did a little research on ChatGPT about that, and it gave us an answer. So could you read what 1/16th speed refers to exactly?
It's just like about the slow motion, right? So 1/16th speed refers to playback speed that is significantly slowed down, as it represents only 1/16th of the original speed. In most contexts, this would be considered extremely slow. For example, if you were watching a video at 1/16th speed, it would take 16 times longer to play through than it would at a normal speed.
So today we're gonna be watching one scene from episode 1 of season 1 of Loki, the spin-off series revolving around Loki. Apparently, Ksenia, the story happens right after the last Avengers game, actually Avengers movie, called Endgame. So the story happens right after that movie, and in this clip, Loki, as we just saw in the preview, he's captured by a group of people.
Laufeyson, variant L1130, aka Loki Laufeyson, is charged with sequence violation 72089. How do you plead?
Madam, a god doesn't plead. Look, this has been a very enjoyable pantomime, but I'd like to go home now.
Are you guilty or not guilty, sir?
Guilty of being the god of mischief? Yes. Guilty of finding all this incredibly tedious? Yes. Guilty of a crime against the sacred timeline? Absolutely not, you have the wrong person. You see, I only came into possession of the Tesseract because they traveled through time. No doubt in a last-ditch effort to stave off my ascent to God King.
Laufeyson, variant L1130, aka Loki Laufeyson, is charged with sequence violation 72089.
So, Thiago, this word he says to be charged with something, right? What does it mean to be charged with?
Yeah, in this legal context, it means when somebody accuses you of a crime, of doing something wrong, you are charged with something. In this context here, Loki is being charged with sequence violation 72089. I imagine that's the number of a law that universe has, and he violated that law.
And then the judge asks him, how do you plead? That's an interesting word.
How do you plead?
Actually, I was gonna ask you, how would you define that?
To plead is to answer a legal charge. We just explained what is to charge, right? And to plead is legally answer that statement. Basically, it's saying whether you are guilty or not. So you can plead guilty or plead innocent.
Like an emotional appeal, right? Like I'm guilty or I'm innocent, right? I really love this word he uses here. He says, this has been a very enjoyable pantomime. It sounds so British.
Look, this has been a very enjoyable pantomime, but I'd like to go home now.
Also the way he speaks, you know, very British-like.
Yeah.
A pantomime is like a play or theater for kids. I guess he's being sarcastic here. Yeah, he's referring to the whole situation of being arrested, having to answer before a judge. He's saying, oh, this has been an amusing, entertaining play or kids play, but now I want to go home. That's basically what he's saying here.
I wanted to tell our viewers and listeners that actually pantomime means different things in American English and in British English. So pantomime in American English, it would mean like this performance without words, yeah, like a silent performance. In the UK, like you mentioned, it's just a theatrical performance. Usually it's a combination of a fairy tale with some singing and music, maybe verse and even acrobatics. In UK, it's common around Christmas time to put on such pantomimes. They are also colloquially called pantos.
I think that it makes sense that it makes sense for us to understand this word from the British perspective then, because, he sounds British when he's speaking. And so, that makes perfect sense.
And you explained it perfectly. He's being sarcastic here, right?
He is.
That's a huge play. That's a performance that they brought him to court.
So Loki is being sarcastic because, after all, he is the god of mischief, as he says, right? What is that, mischief?
Misbehavior. You are being annoying to other people, play tricks on them. This word for me personally is more associated with kids, because you can hear this phrase a lot, that he got into mischief, right?
Yeah, if you think about it, Loki's kind of childish in that sense. Like, he's always tricking people, manipulating people, like playing jokes or pranks on them. So pretending to be somebody he's not, changing his appearance. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love this collocation he says here. Incredibly tedious.
Guilty of finding all this incredibly tedious, yes.
Something tedious is something boring. It's a more formal way to say boring. And I like the incredibly before as an emphasizer, right? It's not just tedious, it's incredibly tedious, like really boring.
It's a very good alternative to the word very that we tend to overuse. Not very tedious, but extremely, incredibly tedious. And tedious here, it also has the connotation of being not only boring, but also lasting for a long time. So that reminds me of boring lectures at the university. Yeah, they tend to be tedious, long and boring, right? Some of them.
That is true. An advanced word for that could be long-winded, a long-winded speech or lecture, like that takes too long. And in American English, we can say that it drags, right? Oh, this class is a drag.
It drags.
Sacred timeline. What is something sacred, Ksenia?
Guilty of a crime against the sacred timeline.
Sacred is something that is sacred. You cannot break that rule, for example, that is sacred, that is blessed. I don't know. It's set by some higher powers.
Something divine, right? Holy.
Holy, that's a good word to explain. Thank you.
Yeah, and a timeline, well, it's a timeline. Let's think about present, past, and future. It's the natural sequence of events. I think the story is about that. It's about multiverse, and apparently Loki is being charged with messing with the sacred timeline. So apparently he does something that interferes with the natural sequence of events. That's why he's being charged. Yeah, Marvel has been big on this multiverse thing, messing with timelines and alternate realities, right? So, and then he says that he came into possession of the Tesseract.
I suspect the Avengers. You see, I only came into possession of the Tesseract because they traveled through time.
This is a very nice collocation as well. When you come into possession of something, you have access to it. You get a hold of it. But this is, I would say, is a much more advanced way to say this, right?
So there is this verb to possess, to have, to own.
And I love the pronunciation too, because the first double S has a Z sound, possess. But then the second double S has a sh sound, possession. It doesn't make any sense, but that's how it is, guys. That's how it works. That's English. And what is a last-ditch effort to do something, Ksenia?
Oh, I like this word. I had to check it up.
No doubt in a last-ditch effort to stave off my ascent to God King.
That's quite an accusation.
And last ditch is the word used to describe a final attempt to achieve something. When there is no hope and you think like, okay, that's my last attempt. I'm gonna try it. When I was reading about this phrase and checking the etymology of it, that referred to those trenches that like soldiers digged in war zones, right? And last ditch, it was like the last ditch, the last trench.
And he says, to stave off my ascent to God King. When you stave something off, you delay it deliberately. So, yeah, he's accusing people there of staving off or delaying his ascent to becoming God King.
You can also use it like to say when you prevent something bad from happening or from affecting you. This root comes back to the old word staff used for the stick. So imagine you keep away the pack of wolves, for example, with that stick, so it would the phrasal verb is to stave off.
Let me ask you something. When you watch one of our lessons here, like this one, for example, do you take notes like this on paper of vocabulary that you learn with us? I used to do that a lot, back in the day. You see, pages and pages of notes. But you know what? I have good news for you because you don't need to do this anymore. You don't need to take lots and lots of notes to learn or remember or review the vocabulary we teach you in these lessons here. You know why? Because we have just released a new feature on the Real Life English app, the standalone flashcards for this very lesson. Instead of having to take a lot of notes, you can watch this lesson on the app and activate a deck of exclusive flashcards for you to practice all this vocabulary you're learning today. Isn't that cool? So join a select group of learners who use the Real Life app to expand their active vocabulary. To claim your flashcards for this lesson, just download the app and follow the instructions. I'm sure you will love it. All right, let's watch the second part of the clip.
You speak of time criminals. It's they you should be after. Perhaps you could provide me with a task force and resources, and I could return and eliminate them for you.
What they did was supposed to happen.
According to whom?
The timekeepers.
Oh, the timekeepers. Right. Well, perhaps I should speak to these timekeepers. Gods to gods.
I'm sorry, but they're quite busy
Oh, they are? What are they doing?
dictating the proper flow of time.
Tiago, he says that they, the judges, should be after someone else, not him, not Loki. To be after someone, what does it mean?
Yeah, it's like to chase that person, trying to get that person into trouble somehow. You are persecuting that person. You run after, chase after that person.
And he says, perhaps you could provide me with something. This word somehow sounds so British, perhaps.
Perhaps you could provide me with a task force and resources, and I could return and eliminate them for you.
It's the same as maybe, right?
Exactly. I would use maybe in most of cases.
Yeah, I actually don't see myself saying perhaps. Maybe I should use it more.
Okay.
But Xen, I really like this part here. Yeah, provide me with something. So I guess you guys out there understand provide. Yeah, you provide, but don't forget the preposition that follows. You provide a person or someone with something. So hopefully this lesson today, guys, is providing you with useful vocabulary. Xenia, this is more of a grammar thing. He says, according to whom. How would you explain the difference between whom and who?
In colloquial speech, we'd rather use who for all the examples, for all the contexts, but formally and grammatically correct is when you have objective case, you should use whom instead of who. Let me bring you an example. So for example, you can ask, who wrote this book, right? So here we see the doer of the action. Yes, somebody wrote that book, so you use who. But when it's an objective case, whom this book was written by, or whom this book was written for, right? So we have a preposition and it requires the objective case. So we might say the book was written by him, and in the question it is by whom, right? So objective case.
Another example I like to give, just to illustrate the sentence and the use of whom, is how it combines the preposition. Because, for example, let's say I can ask you, who did you go with? I'm using who and then the preposition with at the end of my question. Who did you go with? And then I say, oh, I went with my friend. If I want to use whom to ask this question, I can, but then the preposition starts the question. I say, with whom did you go?
Yeah.
But you see, it sounds so formal.
Students may use it because they learned it in their grammar textbooks, right?
Yeah.
When you're talking to your friend, it's not like that. It's like you, like Tiago just mentioned. Who do you go with?
Yeah, that sounds better for everyday conversation. But again, if you're taking an exam or writing an essay, it might be useful to know how to use whom in a question or in a sentence. And then he says that he should speak to these timekeepers, gods to gods. I think he means man to man or one to one.
Man to man.
Yeah.
He just like, again, being sarcastic or just being who he is, being a god. But exactly in English, there is this word, man to man, and it means like an honest, sincere, and direct conversation. Yeah.
Between two people who are presumably at the same level in terms of hierarchy, right? And what does dictating mean? Dictating the proper flow of time.
Oh, they are? What are they doing?
Dictating the proper flow of time.
I see. Right, and then what do you do?
So this word is very interesting. It has several meanings. In this context, it means to control the things, how they happen. So dictate is either control how something is happening or to say, to tell someone what to do, how to do.
Great, so now let's watch the clips once again, this time without subtitles, so you can test your listening skills. Ready?
Laufeyson. Variant L1130, aka Loki Laufeyson, is charged with sequence violation 72089. How do you plead?
Madam, a god doesn't plead. Look, this has been a very enjoyable pantomime, but I'd like to go home now.
Are you guilty or not guilty, sir?
Guilty of being the god of mischief? Yes. Guilty of finding all this incredibly tedious? Yes. Guilty of a crime against the sacred timeline? Absolutely not, you have the wrong person. You see, I only came into possession of the Tesseract because they traveled through time. No doubt in a last-ditch effort to stave off my ascent to God King. You speak of time criminals? It's they you should be after. Perhaps you could provide me with a task force and resources, and I could return and eliminate them for you.
What they did was supposed to happen.
According to whom?
The timekeepers.
Oh, the timekeepers. Right. Well, perhaps I should speak to these timekeepers. Gods to gods.
I'm sorry, but they're quite busy
Oh, they are? What are they doing?
dictating the proper flow of time.
Alright guys, you've made it until the end of the lesson. Great job, you rock. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not a subscriber, share this channel with friends and family so they can subscribe, and if you want to keep learning English while having a ton of fun, you might want to check out this lesson next. We'll talk to you soon.
Whoa! Whoa, 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 whoa! Whoa, whoa! Easy, boy, easy! Settle down! Whoa, whoa! Easy, boy, easy. Easy. That's it. Now sit.